letter.
Lord, thank you for sharing your grace and your presence in our community. And we ask you to look out for Jackie Moore and her family in their days of need, for her fallen illness. Be with us, be with our police officers, our firefighters, and our soldiers as we try to do your work here on earth. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, all present at count for consent, we've got Colton and Robert, Bob, and
I move to excuse Councilmember Langford, Moore, and Christie. Second.
further discussion, hearing all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Agenda's before you, any additions, subtractions, deletions?
I move the agenda with one request, that we take out the first read ordinance for 168A for request of a council member due to lack of attendance tonight and the city attorney not here for questions. Second.
Discussion, I guess the question that I have is the first read ordinance, just some application on, that we're going to take action next meeting. Why would you not?
Mayor, we'd like to move it to July 2nd for a first read of the donation policy ordinance.
Any other further discussion? Not hearing all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. As amended. Citizen comments, so any comments? General comment, I have yours for 11 and 14. Do you want to do them then or do you want to do them now?
That would be great.
Okay, come on. You have to come to the podium.
I see that.
Neighbors, staff, council, and mayor. First thing, Tom Salberg, River District. First thing I'd like to say is thank you to the council, to the staff, especially to Jen and her crew. Orchard Park opening was amazing. Those of you that came, you got to see it. Those of you who will be able to see it in the future will love it. The River District, on behalf of the River District, we really appreciate it. And as you see, Indiana opened up here really quick, and some work being done to finish the sidewalks on the south side of the street in Mission. Everything is looks like it's really in order. And I want to also thank Scott Bernard. He's been working with the neighbors. Katie's been inexplicably absent this last couple of weeks, and Scott has helped with a couple of the neighbors that are in the River District that needed some answers, and we got them really quickly. So thank you so much. With regard to 168A, thank you for continuing it if there's not enough people to do it, but I do want to address one part of 168A, and that is that when you get to your packet, and I think it was pages 51 through 54, but I'm not sure. When you get to section 1, subsection D, I recommend that you strike the portion that says the city council shall maintain the final authority to accept or deny any gift or donation. And I refer you back to a couple of comments I've made before. I think that that's unnecessary and micromanaging. It's also duplicative, because if you go to section 5, the city council has the right to reserve to deny any donation if upon review acceptance of the donation is determined to be not in the best interest of the city. So the city council already has the final say. So please consider that when you do your next workshop on it. And I just thank you for the work that you've done and the turnout on a summer night.
Thanks, Tom. Any other comments? Still got a couple more minutes left.
Mr.
All right.
Mayor,
Pardon?
I do have a citizen
Oh, yes,
comment
that's
I'd like
right,
to
okay.
read into record. This is a letter dated June 9th, 2019, that was addressed to our Operations and Maintenance Director. Dear Jennifer, the purpose of my letter is to initiate a discussion about the development of Dog Park in Liberty Lake. This community has been blessed with multiple amenities such as Pavilion Park, Rocky Hill Park, small neighborhood parks, a skate park, tennis courts, 3 golf courses, and 25 miles of trails. The one thing that is lacking is an off-leash dog park. Spokane metropolitan area ranks number 4 in the country for dog ownership. Dog ownership continues to be a growing national trend. As an example, Seattle now has more dogs than children in their population. In our own neighborhood, 50% of households own dogs. The need for a dog park is obvious, and it would serve as a community asset. I would help in any way possible to survey the community concerning the need for a dog park. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, Marla Larson.
Thank you. Any other comments? I hear we're moving on, so the city board and commission reports, so I see that the Parks and Art Commission's here, so you're number 1.
Sure. Okay, Lena Schutz, Chairperson of the Parks and Arts Commission. We are extremely busy working on all of the projects that we have slated for this year. Currently, utility box projects, we have selected artwork, and CW Wraps has come out to template all of those boxes that are there on Apple Way, so we can get started wrapping those hopefully this summer. I personally delivered our dummy box to CW Wraps today, which was interesting. They're going to rewrap the one for Pavilion Park with the historical photos. That was the best way to get it done quickly, and so that's what we're doing. Our goat statue call to artists has been extended till June 30th. We've gotten a few submissions, a couple really good ones, but we wanted to extend it further, get it on the city site, see if we can get a few more. Our story walk is finishing. Our students have actually graduated, and they've put all of them together, and all that's left to do is paint them at this point. Came in over budget. Just kind of some kinks with the students and using precision cutting here in Liberty Lake. They're a little more expensive, but we'll be able to replicate it if we want to do it again. So I think that was important. But we are able to take some money budgeted from utility boxes because STCU is going to sponsor those again. So we should be good. We also are getting a call to artists for a mural, potentially in Pavilion Park. We're working on that now, and then we would have it open through August, potentially with them doing it in September. Questions?
Fantastic. Good job.
Thanks.
That sounds like one of the great things.
The library board, oh, James, sorry. Library board, the library board, there we go. There's,
Well, Jocelyn's been in contact with the people that are going to do the needs assessment for us. She's invited the Board of Trustees to get as involved as we're able to do. And other than that, we're reviewing the policies. We review 2 to 4 policies every month. She's trying to update everything, keep it moving, so that's it in a nutshell.
all right. Thank you, Tom. Thanks to the library board. And Jocelyn, you bring a lot of energy to our library. You can see this, you get everybody moving, so thank you again for joining us. So we have a planning commission.
Good evening. My name is Phil Follier, Planning Commission Chair. The Planning Commission met on, actually, my report's going to be rather short, but that doesn't mean we were just sitting around shooting the breeze at our Planning Commission meeting on June 12th. The Commission welcomed 2 new adjunct members. Thank you for responding to the vacancies in a timely manner. The Commission held a public hearing regarding the proposed 5G wireless facility development code. The commission approved with modifications the proposed amendment with a 5-2 vote. I believe Lisa will be addressing the concerns of the two in her workshop for your consideration. We also had 2 additional workshops, not very lengthy discussion, but nonetheless needed to have them regarding the electronic monument signs on public property and chain link fence for sports in the River District. That concludes my report. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I didn't see, Friends of the Library, Friends of the Library, do you have any comments? We have an upcoming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Holly Woodruff. I'm president of the Friends of the Liberty Lake Library. This is a busy summer for us. We're wrapping up our quilt project fundraiser, so if you want your name permanently on a spine, on a quilt that looks like a part of the library, that will hang in the library, the end of the month is the deadline, so please, we have order forms at the library. And also you can just contact us through the Friends of the Library Facebook page. So that's wrapping up at the end of this month. This week is our big book sale, Friday and Saturday, the same time as the Kiwanis yard sale. So for those of you who've been around for that before, you know it's kind of a wild time, a huge block party. This is another one of our big fundraisers. So we usually sell thousands of books, literally, and we have a lot of books to get out of the storage room so that we have some room for other things. Last but not least is our second annual summer soiree, which will be July 24th at the Liberty Lake Wine Cellars. Again, you can contact me through our Facebook page, or you can get tickets. We take credit cards now, so we are moving slowly into the 21st century. But you can get tickets. We'll be at the Farmers Market on June 29th and July 13th. And also, you can get tickets at the wine cellar or at the library. So, busy summer for us, and thank you very much for letting me kind of give us a plug. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other sewer and water?
Back here. I'm gonna try to sneak this side here. Can I get you there? Hi, Kottayam Natarajan, Liberty Lake Sewer and Water District. I only have one thing, just a reminder that tomorrow is the very exciting open house at the new facility, 2 to 7. You can just come and go as you please. There'll be appetizers and refreshments and tours. Like every half hour, they're going to take a group through to see the facility. So it's open to the whole community. If you want to get inside the giant building that's out there off to the north side of the highway, it's pretty interesting inside. It's all clean and new, and there's pipes everywhere and control rooms and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's worth stopping by if you want to just take a quick look. See there.
A couple of things just don't go together. Appetizers and refreshments at the sewer just don't together.
Well, that is true. Although the water coming out of that thing is really clean, very clean. In fact, I told those guys, I said, if it's really clean, could you drink it? And the engineer was like, well, theoretically. I said, we should do a big stunt. We should drink it. He goes, well, I wouldn't drink it. I said, well, you said I could drink it. He goes, well, theoretically you can drink it. It's actually the pharmaceuticals I think you worry about, but everything else is taken out. Anyway, I will luckily not be there tomorrow. I have to leave for New York tomorrow morning. So I would have done that, but I can't because I got to be out of town. So anyway, I gave him my best shot. Any questions or anything? Everything else good? All right, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. The fire district, we have a fire commissioner. I don't see him. So we're good. Anything else? We're good to the order. Moving on. City council reports.
There was a couple citizens that were at Farmers Market that brought some ideas and concerns to Farmers Market, one of which was at the corner of Myers and Hole. If you recall, there was a citizen that requested a stop sign be put there, which we did. Somebody dropped the stop sign down a little bit because there's a tree that blocks it, but there's still a lot of concern about people riding that stop sign. So they requested to see if we could have somebody come out and paint a stop sign line to help reinforce that stop needs to be made. That's something we can look at.
Pass it on.
Stop bar.
There was also some concerns from citizens regarding Indiana and Aladdin, 2 main roads that come into the River District. a number of people speed down those roads, Indiana in particular. And there's requests for speed signs similar to what we did by the school, speeding areas, because cars are going so fast on those two main roads.
So real quick on that subject is speeding. I know Chief is working with Scott to identify some technology that we can purchase and install around town. One of the things that we hear is when you put the trailer out, people slow down, so it really isn't accurate. But with the new technology, it's fairly inexpensive, and it's a device that's mobile. We can use it all over to get good data on the speed of the car, the number of trips, and all of those things. So I think it's in the works.
Chief, anything from you?
I don't think so. That's it.
Okay.
We're working on a technology solution.
Okay, good.
And then the last one was, Adorable Flowers was looking at doing something for Nicole from Just Chilling. Something to support the family, so they might have something posted on their website, so I encourage you guys to take a look at that and see how we can continue to support that family.
Okay. Anything else? Mike? You?
Quick one on the River District update, or request. I wonder if city staff could reach out to the HOA out there on some code enforcement stuff regarding tree burning. It's just sort of all over the neighborhood, there's not one in particular. And tree limb heights are too low over the road, limb heights are too low over the sidewalks. And just wonder if we could just kind of urge them for a little bit of, it's a grown neighborhood, it's getting a little older, trees are getting a little bit bigger. So.
Where's that again, you?
What's that?
Where's that again?
All over the River District.
The River District, okay.
Yeah, so we're looking for, I think it's 8 feet of clearance over sidewalks, 13 over the street, and sometimes homeowners need reminders.
Okay. We'll do that. And on our webpage, we can do that. Put it by Orchard Park, see, because everybody's watching the kids that play at the splash pad, tell me. Maybe we should trim our trees, right? Any other, Mike?
Yeah, quite a few of us attended the soft opening, or great opening of Orchard Park. It was outstanding, the weather was great, citizens were there, some of the folks that are here today were there. It's absolutely outstanding to see the kids running around and have such a great time on it. That's going to be an awesome park when it gets done by the end of this next year. One of the questions that came up in the previous meeting was parking is going to be an issue running east, north, and south on that street. So I think most of us left about 2:30 or something like that, and I just took an opportunity to go back by later on in the day. We've got 25 spaces, I think it's 25 spaces in that parking lot on the north side, and I think 3 handicap. There was 3 spaces available when I left, and there was 18 cars parked on the road going east and west, which is really wide enough that I'm not going to have a challenge. So I think we really seriously have to consider putting no parking on the street running north and south.
That's called Harvest Parkway.
Harvest Parkway. So I think what will happen, because it's going to fill up, we're going to have individuals start parking on that street, and I think the congestion can be very dangerous for our kids, especially if they were to try to park on the east side of that.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it. It was designed, and I don't remember the details, but it was designed to allow or not to allow parking. And just a reminder, there is a parking lot on the south end of the park as well.
Right,
And
yeah,
I don't know the counts, but
25.
on the south.
Both of them were identical.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, that's all.
Any other comments? I had the opportunity to attend the Soapbox Derby down Moulton Road. It was absolutely fun. Special needs kids, and they have drivers especially that come down the Soapbox Derby car. And they're special cars, they're made for 2 people. And both individuals in that car get a great deal of enjoyment out of it. And so they're always looking for more kids to participate, whether you're a driver or a special needs person. It's a wonderful event that takes place the day before Father's Day, so on Saturday. So fun was had by all. With that said, Kate?
Okay, I'm going to take a cue from everyone else and be very brief. We are videotaping this council meeting for those of you that weren't here at the workshop. We're not going to be streaming it live, but once we work out the bugs, we're hopefully July 2nd, we will be posting our videotaping of the council meetings on Facebook. So thing. Just a quick update on the Harvard and Henry Road projects. There's a lot going on the real estate side, and I'm going to give you an update in the executive session today on that. We're also having conversations with WashDOT on some of the logistics of negotiations, but we have not begun negotiations with WashDOT at all. And so there's nothing to report there. There's a few situations that have come up, and I'll just let you know what those are in a kind of a general way, which is we're all looking for some consideration for the right-of-way that the city is planning to bring to the table. How that's going to be calculated, I don't know. But as soon as we get through that process, we'll be bringing back the agreement for the council to agree or not agree with. Right now, the project, the state really hasn't put any resources into it until after July 1st, because that's when it actually gets funded. So we've just been talking around the edges. There's really nothing new to report. On the design, I will tell you, Harvard Road design is at 60% done. We want to take that to 100 and then turn it over to WashDOT for construction, but none of that's going to happen until after the council approves the contract. So I'm going to keep moving. The AWC conference, I know most of you have signed up to go. I did register to go, and I'm not going to be able to attend. So if Dan or Hugh, if you want to go in my place, you can use my registration, but if you can't, I'll offer it to a city staff person. The mobile workshop with Comcast is still scheduled for June 26th at 2 p.m. The itinerary for that workshop, I printed copies, but I forgot to print enough, so Mayor and Shane, could you share your itineraries with me, Mike and Dan? That is kind of bringing a group of elected officials out to Liberty Lake so that we can showcase some of the things that we've done here. We were asked by the conference to provide an insight into what makes Liberty Lake a unique place to be. So we're kind of excited to show that off. So I'm going to move down to number 4, flashing beacons. So just a little bit of background on this. I know a couple weeks ago we had some citizens from the gardens come and talk about wanting a flashing beacon on Country Vista. We already have 4 on that stretch, and I'm not saying that we're not putting one there, but I wanted to share with council how it kind of works. One is there has to be what's called a Cobra head, so you have to make sure that you have power to put in the flashing beacon. The other thing is that it has to meet all the code requirements for ADA, so there has to be the ability for there to be landings that meet ADA requirements. The geometry of the street has to be taken into consideration. And so right now we have 2 beacons going in. They're both in the River District area. One is to cross Indiana from basically Orchard Park to a linear park, kind of a walkway. It would be north and east of north and west of Orchard Park, crossing Indiana. And the other one is to cross Mission, just west of the roundabout. So those are going in this year. They were planned, they were designed, they're in design right now, and they were budgeted to go in this year. We do receive a lot of requests for beacons throughout the city, and so I do plan to follow up with the gardens and talk to them about the beacon. But we have to put the design concept together, we have to order the parts, we have to budget for it. All that has to happen before we can actually move forward with the project. But I will reach out to the gardens. The individual that spoke, I don't have his phone number. I called the number and it was wrong, so I haven't done that yet. I'm trying to do it during the day when
I'll give this to you, Katie.
Okay, thank you. But I don't want to leave this as a negative or a no. I just want to say there's a lot of thought that has to go into where they are, that we make sure that we do them correctly and that they're in a place that makes sense. Not so much from pedestrians, but also from, we don't put them in neighborhoods, we put them on arterials or neighborhood collectors, those kinds of things. So I think we have probably 10 to 12 around the city, and we have some up north. We have, moving into the River District, we're putting some there, but a lot of thought has to go into them. The one that, excuse me, that is surprising to me that works so well is the one that's by Home Depot, the one on Country Vista. You could not cross the street at all without walking probably 1.5 miles if you were somewhere down there. So that, I really like seeing that flashing beacon go, because a lot of people live on that end of the street and couldn't get to the other side of the street, and I see it going quite a bit. So that's all I have with flashing beacons, but our goal is to identify some new locations, do enough design work so we know what the costs are gonna be, and then kind of package and include in our budget for 2020. Donations, I'm not gonna go into all the details, but you do have copies, thanks to Ann Swenson. The directors made a list, and these are since April, I'll be giving you guys an update, but these are the donations that we received at City Hall, Police Department, and the library in the last probably month or so. Actually, the donations go back to April 15th, so on a quarterly basis, I'll just be printing this up so you're aware of what donations we're receiving. This is our first shot, so there are probably a lot of things in there that we don't receive all the time, but just want to make sure that you have this was asked for at the last council meeting. And finally, dates to remember, the Water Reclamation Open House is tomorrow, June 19th. I didn't have the time, when we're...
2 to 7.
2 to 7.
And it's open house, so come and go as you please.
Okay, excellent.
Not stay for the whole time.
Yeah. Okay, the yard sale, as we all know, it's, oh boy, it's Friday and Saturday. AWC conference starts next week. The 4th of July celebration is on the 4th of July. The SRTC training is July 10th and 11th. That is for, I believe, elected officials. There is a registration required, and it's related to transportation. And then the Friends of Liberty Lake Library, the soiree, the fundraiser is July 24th. It's in the evening. Holly, remind me of the time.
6 to 8:30.
6 to 8:30. That concludes my report, Mayor.
Okay, so we're at the workshop. Lisa?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I will do my best to be brief on what is a hefty topic, but I was at the farmer's market this weekend and talked to several council people who wanted to make certain that I hit at least the highlights of some of the design standards. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. First of all, what are small wireless facilities, which is the focus of this ordinance. So these are really dealing with 4G and 5G equipment with and the equipment features are less than 50 feet high. Generally speaking, if it's a replacement pole, it can be 10 feet higher than that. Antennas are less than 3 cubic feet. It requires an equipment box and wiring or fiber, and that the whole unit is, all of the parts and pieces are less than 28 cubic feet per facility. So and this comes right out of the FCC regulations. Again, they are smaller and more densely located than the larger macro cell tower antenna arrays that you're used to seeing, one of which is right behind the police station. They're located primarily in the right-of-way on streetlights or overhead utility poles. So basically, why are we here? Because the FCC issued a declaratory ruling that went into effect in January to help facilitate the rapid deployment of 5G to meet increasing demand, both in terms of data capacity and speed. And some of the features of this declaratory ruling is that it established new rules related to permit review timelines that we are going to be challenged to meet without a new ordinance. They really forced the hands of not just the municipalities, but also other utility providers in terms of co-location. The FCC, in their infinite wisdom, decided that they knew how much it should cost us to review these permit applications, so they set the bar for what was considered a reasonable fee. And they also had some pretty stringent requirements around aesthetic standards. It's not that we can't have them, but they have to be objective, they have to be published, they can't be more onerous than what we apply to other utilities, and the aesthetic standards cannot result in the effective prohibition of service. So at the end of the day, we can have design standards, but if the provider demonstrates that it's technically infeasible to meet those design standards in order to achieve their network objectives, then we have no choice but to allow them to address that. So that's kind of the context of this. Based upon this declaratory ruling and the fact that we have a pending small wireless franchise agreement that'll be coming forward to you in July, we're in negotiations right now. We need to have a code in place that meets these new FCC regulations. Our current code doesn't address small wireless facilities, and it actually deals with macro wireless facilities, what we refer to as wireless communication antenna arrays and towers, which require a conditional use permit with a visual simulation and SEPA review that at the end of the day will never meet any of the shot clock requirements anywhere in this regulatory ruling. It also doesn't allow those macro facilities in the R1 or the O zone, which basically represents 50% of the area within the city. It doesn't have any aesthetic standards, nor does it provide any basis for exclusion in the R1 and O zones. Again, as I said, procedural requirements will not meet those shot clocks. So the new code proposes to change 4 basic areas of our code. We've got amendments and definitions, and it's pretty straightforward. We're adding those definitions that are relevant to this small wireless facility. We also have to amend our prior language on the regulations related to those macro cells, the wireless communication facility antennas and towers, and we need to differentiate these macro cells, which don't have the same rules from the micro or from the small cells. And so we're making some amendments to that effect. In the zoning district regulations, for each of the zones, we have to we can't prohibit the small cells in any zone. So they are listed as a limited use in all the zones. But what we've provided in the zoning regulations are some siting criteria. And basically, it's our preferences for where and how these get deployed. They're not hard and fast, but if you can't do this, if you can demonstrate that you can't meet this siting requirement, then we'll allow it in this circumstance. And I'm going to go into those in just a second. It also requires that it meets the design standards in section 10.3 of our code, which is our design and maintenance standards. And we have a whole new section for small wireless facilities. And I'm going to touch on a high level those design standards a little bit. And finally, in section 10.4 of our development code, that's a section that deals with our permit reviews and procedures. We're creating a new section related to new small wireless facility permits. And I'm going to touch on very briefly on what that entails. So basically, the siting hierarchy, we have basically 2 siting hierarchies, one in commercial and mixed use zones and one in the residential zone. So our hierarchy for the commercial and mixed use is that our preferred location is co-location on existing buildings or replacement of non-wooden light poles. And why the replacement poles is because Avista won't allow them to simply add on to their existing light poles. They require them to do replacement poles, which is a good thing because with the replacement poles, all the wiring and much of the equipment is actually internally located. So it's a much cleaner design. So that's our preferred. If they can demonstrate that it's not technically feasible to meet their network objectives using non-wooden light poles, we will then allow co-location on existing or replacement wooden or metal utility poles. And we'll talk again about that in the design standards a little bit, but that's a secondary use. So if those overhead utility poles ever go away, then the wireless communication device has to be relocated. And if they can't meet any of those, we will allow for a wireless-only pole. And there was quite a bit of discussion with some of our more technically astute residents about, well, can we require a neutral host technology? We did float that balloon in terms of the franchise agreement and also in terms of the code, and it went over like a Led Zeppelin. There's both, it's actually directly prohibited that municipalities can't show favor for one technology over another, and and there's also a section in the declaratory ruling that basically eliminates the potential for us to do it. We tried, but wireless-only poles, and we do have some design standards associated with that when we get to the design standards section. The siting hierarchy in residential zones, and keeping in mind that because of our dark sky ordinance, there's very few residential areas that have many light poles other than maybe at the intersection of a collector and an arterial. So our siting preference, and this is based upon a lot of discussion with the Planning Commission, is co-location on existing or replacement non-wooden light poles, buildings, or structures adjacent to the zoning district boundaries. So trying to, as much as we can, keep it out of the residential neighborhoods to the extent that we can. Again, if it's not technically feasible to meet those network objectives, whatever they may be, co-location on existing or replacement utility poles, buildings, or other structures within a neighborhood park, or other existing light poles or buildings within the zoning district is our second tier. And the final tier, and probably what's going to be most feasible, is the wireless-only poles, but we'd like to try some of these other options. We try and like to force the utilities to at least look at the other options first. And the reason why I say that it's more likely going to be a wireless-only pole is because what we have heard from a number of the utility providers is that they're really trying to stay away from anything but right-of-way, because they have the most rights under this declaratory ruling in the right-of-way, and basically we can't say no and the utility provider can't say no. So that's so those are the siting criteria, and you'll, yes.
So to talk to the wireless-only pole location potential, an operator could approach the city and say, for technical reasons, they will erect a wireless-only pole in a residential neighborhood in the right-of-way.
Yes.
Okay, I just make sure I heard that right.
You heard that right, and we have put some thresholds in there. They have to show that they don't have any of the other options, or not technically feasible before they can do that. But at the end of the day, yes, and that is basically the bottom line of the regulatory ruling is that we have to allow that if there's no other choice. And so going on, so that's where the design standards come in. And so in terms of the section 10-3, we have a new section related to these design standards. Generally, the size and height limits are consistent with the FCC regulations for small wireless facilities. So they can't be any bigger than what it's defined as in that regulatory ruling. We do allow that replacement poles may be 10 feet taller than existing poles, but in no event taller than 60 feet. Again, that is something that Avista did point out, that they have some of their poles are in fact taller than 60 feet, and but the Planning Commission felt that since it was outside of what was required by the FCC, that we didn't really want to see these taller poles in our city. Non-interference with use, generally they can't interfere with the use of our existing right-of-way. They have to meet ADA requirements and site triangle compliance, and that's specifically called out in the code. And then we also have some requirements related to concealment, non-illumination, and no advertising or signage. However, the equipment boxes that may be located in the base of the pole, they can have Art Commission, RAPS Commission too, so we will allow those, and we actually confirmed with Verizon that they could actually do that, so that is a possibility. In terms of the yes sir.
One thing that I've noticed with the bigger, what we have today, and there's some, where you have like a grouping, you're driving through and your radio goes away, they interfere with your radio signals. I mean, even in our neighborhood where we have a little wireless antenna, your radio signal goes to your satellite radio signal again.
So I'm not a techie, so I can't answer that. I think you have some people in the audience that
I'm not
probably
either.
could. Jim Alexander could probably answer that question. But my understanding, what limited understanding that I have is that these tend to be lower frequencies than what the traditional signals are. So I don't know the answer, but maybe
Well,
maybe
the
someone.
friend of mine would be
We can
that
find- I can find out.
Interfered with somebody's reception of television. What was your question?
It says non-illumination, is there talk about, if it's inside of a residential neighborhood, some of those residential neighborhoods have streetlights already, can we allow them to combine with streetlights, or we're just saying? they
Yes,
can't?
what we don't want them to do is we don't want them to put neon lights on their wireless only or different artistic, we don't want them to be bringing more attention to it than it needs to be. But certainly they can include camouflage, and there are some requirements in the design standards as I get into a little bit that they have to look similar to, if they're not, similar to the poles that are already in the neighborhood. So if the poles in the neighborhood have lights on them, they can have lights, but presumably if they have those poles with lights on them, they're going to actually use a stealth design and a replacement pole with the light feature. And so we do have some design standards related to that.
Would it be a good or bad idea to require, if it goes into any neighborhood, or would it be a good or bad idea to require that it be like a street light?
We talked-
Adding more light
We
for us?
talked about that at Planning Commission, and that may be something that you as council want to consider, but again, what I heard from the Planning Commission was because the community really values their dark sky ordinance, we don't want to encourage more lights than what we already have. Some of the neighborhoods really value the fact that they don't have street lights. So we did have that very discussion, so good comment. Yes, sir.
Does the code include any total EMI energy output limits of the device?
So this is, I'm gonna answer you in a non-technical way. So I'm not sure if this is answering your question or not. They have to demonstrate that they meet the FCC regulations, and for the initial permit, they have to have a certification from a radio frequency engineer that says that they fall below the frequencies that are regulated by the FCC in terms of human exposure to radiation. And there are some limits in the code. Unfortunately, I think that the declaratory ruling is focused more on the macro, or that the regulations in the FCC regulations today focus more on the outputs from the macro, and they're not really reflective of the lower range. This is, again, what I've gathered through my reading, but
I'm not trying to cast a shadow on a network operator, but should they choose or want to try and increase the output of these devices, does our code protect us or allow us to shut them down?
so, and that's an interesting question. We're going to get into the permitting requirements in just a little bit, and there was quite a bit of discussion. So at the time of permit, at the time of permitting, we have to have this certification by the radio frequency engineer that looks at individual and cumulatively the exposure, okay, and then it meets the standards of the federal regulations. We had originally, we're requiring an annual registration, and we're asking that originally we were going to ask for an annual recertification by that radio frequency engineer. There's a lot of pushback on Planning Commission, and so the discussion was, well, we do the annual registration where they attest to the fact that all of their equipment is in good working order and that they're in compliance with their FCC regulations. And then we would require the retesting at the time of the franchise agreement renewal. And so that was, we'll get to that a little bit. The Planning Commission had quite a bit of discussion, and that was the reason for the split vote, actually, because two of the members really felt like we shouldn't even be going that far. So, but again, it's certainly an option, and it is certainly your your decision as to whether or not you want to be a little bit more restrictive on that. We were getting some pushback from the utility providers as it related to that requirement to do an annual recertification on that front, but anyhow, so good question. So in terms of the non-wooden poles, we have some standards related to the equipment being fully concealed if feasible, and for some of the antennas it's not feasible, but they have to at least be colored the same color as the pole. Fiber and wiring must be fully concealed within the pole if it's feasible, or within shrouds, canisters, conduit, or sleeves if it's not. But again, I think for most of the non-wooden poles, Avista is requiring them to do replacement poles with all of that internally located anyhow. The style and color of replacement poles and height of luminaires needs to match the style of poles in the surrounding area. Wireless equipment that's co-located on existing or replacement poles is considered secondary to the primary function of the pole. What that means is that if for some reason that pole goes away, they have to relocate. They don't get to, and that was one of the issues that we had with the ordinance in the city of Spokane, where the light pole goes away, and yet they still have the wireless equipment on there, and it was problematic from an enforcement standpoint. Finally, mid-pole equipment cabinets are only permitted if other location options are technically infeasible. And they kind of hang in the middle of the pole, and they're really blatantly obvious. That was an aesthetic call for sure. Wooden poles, we have some similar requirements. They're a little bit different. The replacement pole. So Avista also does not allow pole extenders on their poles. So replacement poles need to match the color of the original pole, or at least be a standard replacement pole. Again, we've got shrouding requirements related to the other equipment in boxes. The antennas and all the equipment need to be painted a neutral color so that it kind of blends with the wood of the pole. Again, mid-pole equipment enclosures will, as with non-wooden poles, they're only permitted if you can't find them elsewhere. And the same about the secondary function of the wireless. So the standalone wireless poles, they have to resemble existing poles in the right-of-way near that location. They have to be non-wooden, and the equipment has to be fully concealed within the pole unless it's technically infeasible, and they must be located at least 180 feet from any other existing pole. Again, unless it's technically infeasible. We can't say anything black and white, no, you cannot do this. Yes, sir.
Lisa, thank you. You just touched on one thing. It was a question I'm a little confused about. I attended your meeting last Wednesday. It's absolutely amazing what you and the commission's amount of time you guys have put into understanding this. There's a lot to it, and I appreciate the time and effort you put into it. One thing I'm not clear about is this, is that right now we're dealing with Verizon, and they're the first ones coming forward to be able to put these poles in. So what I'm not clear is what happens when AT&T or somebody else shows up? They can't put their equipment on the same pole, correct? So we're going to have multiple poles.
That's correct. And again, so yes, that is correct. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that there's spacing so that if AT&T and Verizon have basically taken up the capacity on one street, hopefully it's possible to address this on the street over. Again, all we can do is do the best we can do, given the fact that at the end of the day, if their network objectives require that they be placed in a certain location, none of this is relevant anyhow. All we can do is create this hierarchy where we expect that they at least try and meet our standards.
Yeah, I've been in telecommunications for over 30 years, and every time the government comes out with something where we have to adopt it, we cannot go against it. My experience has been, it's always been in the right-of-ways, which didn't really affect the citizens much. My concern that I see here is that this is going to be in residential. I think what's going to happen, correct me if I'm wrong, what's going to happen when this starts being implemented, we're going to get a lot of potential a lot of pushback from our citizens. They're saying, well, I've not had this thing in my yard before, now I have this here.
And it won't be in their yard, it will be in the right-of-way. We did try and expand this beyond the right-of-way because I think that in some cases, it may be less onerous with some shrouding, put it on a building, so we want to encourage that. I don't know that that's necessarily going to go anywhere. We want to see it in our residential neighborhoods. Let's see if we can't utilize the light poles that are in our parks instead of putting it in the right-of-way or attach it to a building that's in the park rather than having these standalone poles. At the end of the day, we're somewhat powerless. All we can do is as far as we can go. What I will say, though, is that the regulatory ruling really only forces the hand of the city and the residents within public right-of-way. Private streets are not public right-of-way, that's private property. And so that's a whole different deal, and that will then become a question between the homeowners association and their residents as to what they desire. But the flip side of it is, if they want the service, the homeowners may need to agree to those terms. It's because in order for the network to work, the span of these,
Right.
the
500 feet.
yeah, 500 feet is relatively small.
Thank you.
Inside of the, says, we're talking about utilizing existing facilities. Would it be possible, say, Rising comes and says, we want to put a pole in the right of way in front of your house. Right of way in front of my house kind of is my yard too, a little bit. Or actually,
understand.
I'm in the river district, they're really small yards. So, would it be possible for them to come and say, hey, we'd be happy to mount one on your roof?
So
Which I prefer.
it's possible, and so we've provided some standards, and we've identified some architectural design concepts that to encourage them to look at buildings as another option, because in some cases that may be less onerous and it may be easier to camouflage on a building. But at the end of the day, we can't force them to do that. One of the things that the utilities are saying is first of all, they like the line of sight that you get out of the right-of-way. That's number one. Number two, the fact that the FCC gave them a honking great deal on leasing the equipment in the right-of-way. So, and they don't have the same protections when they're not in public right-of-way.
They have to pay lease payments to put it on your roof, but it's free if it's in the right.
Well, it's actually, we can actually charge $270 a year if it's our equipment. The situation is it's not our equipment, it's Avista's equipment. But,
So
yeah.
I have just a real quick question. It seems like there's a saturation and a density question, because there's also the practicality of installing these devices and all that. So what I'm hearing is there is no threshold of density or saturation of small cell wireless in the federal regulations. Is that correct?
I believe that that's so, except to the extent that they start to affect each other's networks. The reality is that, and I want to back up for a second, so we're in our infancy in this whole conversation, and FCC is pushing us way beyond our comfort zone, but the reality is that the providers are also way beyond their comfort zone also. There's a huge investment in infrastructure that needs to happen to roll this out, and it's moving relatively slowly. I expect that the technology is going to evolve, and the rules are going to evolve as we go along.
So the public hearing is in July.
Yes.
And is it the 2nd or the 16th? Probably the 16th.
So I'm recommending that we do it on the 16th, because I really wanted council to have time to really read the ordinance. I'm trying to give you highlights here, but at the end of the day, I want you to have a chance to really dig into it, and if you have questions for me, I'm available to answer them. I just want to, kind of some final things. Procedural timeline. We've gone through, we've had a number of planning commission workshops, and I've talked to you about this more than a few times. So we really have done everything we can in putting it out to the community and trying to engage the community. Not that it's it's the most user-friendly topic of conversation. We also have done our best to engage the industry, and we have reached out to Verizon Wireless as well as AT&T Mobility, which actually provides the infrastructure for Sprint and presumably T-Mobile when they merge. Vista, who actually owns most of the light poles in the city, and Raycap, who is one of the sales reps. It's a company in Post Falls that is actually involved in the concealment technologies for the 4G and 5G. And we have a resident here in the city of Liberty Lake who actually works there, and so he's been involved a little bit, and he apologized he couldn't be here tonight, but he has been following it and has provided words of encouragement along the way. So basically, last thing, so we did have the hearing at the Planning Commission last Wednesday, and it was they recommended approval of the version that is in your packet, so it does reflect the amendments that the Planning Commission made, by a vote of 5-2. The two dissenting members really had an issue specifically with requiring annual registration with an affidavit that their equipment is in good working order and compliant with the FCC license, which you can see on page DC 21 in paragraph L1. So that was the compromise position from requiring an annual recertification by the RF engineer. So they also had concerns regarding requiring recertification from that RF engineer at the time of franchise agreement renewal, which is every 10 years, so that we have a check-in to say, hey, yes, you've certified under perjury, threat of perjury, that annually that you're meeting this, but let's see what the engineer has to say about your equipment once every 10 years. Yeah.
Were the dissenting opinions advocating to these positions?
So the dissenting positions thought that that we were trying to be in more of a regulatory role than was appropriate for the city, because the FCC regulates it. So if they have a license with the FCC will take care of whether or not they're meeting the requirements. It was basically the argument. Yes, sir.
Dan's comment, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't one of the concerns, a couple of commissioners, that why are we going to so much difficulty or effort to try to do some sort of regulation here? We're not doing it with cable or the other franchises we deal with. Is that part of that?
So I think that was a little bit of the point that Charlie Matthews made at the last meeting that was kind of being reiterated at this meeting. So yeah, so I think that there was a concern along those lines. So again, the last thing that I would say is that with your approval, I would like to get this noticed for hearing on July 16th. The franchise agreement, the Verizon franchise agreement, we're in discussions on that one. We expect that to be coming forward at the same time for your approval. We've got a shot clock ticking that says it has to be in place by mid-July, and I'd really like to have the regulations in place by mid-July so that otherwise it's a free reign situation. Yeah.
Based on your franchise discussions with Verizon, is the agreement compliant with what has been developed as the code?
Yes. Yes. I've really been working on these things in parallel for that very reason.
So you'd want to take action after the public hearing on the 16th?
Yes. In fact, what I would ask of council is that you suspend the rules and do the first and second reading.
Okay.
I guess the question would be, why would you not want to have a public hearing on the 2nd?
We could do it on the 2nd, and I absolutely could. My thought was that to give council enough time to dig into this. It's a 41 odd page.
You can have two public hearings. I mean, the goal is not so much from the council standpoint. The goal of public hearing, to my understanding, is from the citizens' comments to the council and to you about
Absolutely.
this issue. And I think having we're going to be here anyway, we can have a public hearing then, we can have another one on the 16th. Then we can also, on the 2nd, notice them that we're going to take action on the 16th. There's a first read on the 2nd, second read on the 16th.
Okay.
Makes a lot more sense to me rather than trying to.
We can absolutely do that. We can absolutely do that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
For the spill. Action item, Shane.
Mayor, move action item, consent agenda 1 and 2, to approve June 4th, 2019 city council minutes, and to approve June 18th vouchers in the amount of $620,427.
Second.
Move the second, further discussion. I hear you all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, let it go.
General business number 1, authorize purchase of security cameras in the amount of $8,197.06 for Orchard Park.
Second.
Second, discussion.
Question.
Question.
Is this our 5th camera that we've purchased like this? Don't we have 4 of them now, Chief?
Yes. Yes, I'm there.
This is our 5th one? Correct.
No, fourth. Down Square Pavilion, Rocky, Orchard.
I thought we already had 4.
This will be our fourth.
Is number 4?
Four.
Who votes for 4?
I see a lot of heads turning out here.
I bet.
So I think the new camera systems that we're talking about, this will be 4. But we have existing camera systems already in the parks and on Trailhead. But the new system, this is the 4th new camera.
Can I ask a question? So far, how has it been going with the 3 we've already installed?
We do not have access to them yet, so I think we're still working out a few of the bugs. We're close.
Okay, very good.
I get another one.
Now, this 4th one will be just that much closer.
This side was close. Okay, further discussion. I hear you all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Well,
I move general business number 2, to authorize acceptance of the loan agreement for Wickham to Horses Art Piece for the Liberty Lake resident John Vickery.
Second.
From
any second discussion? I hear you all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Go.
Move general business number 3, to approve updated interlocal agreement for fire services in the city of Liberty Lake.
Second.
Any second discussion? I hear you all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
General business number 4, to authorize the mayor to execute a right-of-way dedication agreement with Vista for the dedication of property along the north side of Appleway Avenue, east of Harvard Road.
Second.
Any second discussion? I hear you all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
General business number 5, to authorize the purchase and sale agreement between the city of Liberty Lake and the Central Valley School District.
Second.
Any second further discussion? I hear you all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There we go. Public hearings. City of Liberty Lake Site Design Review.
All right, this one is really quick. So basically, the purpose of these amendments, I've workshopped this with you previously. The purpose of these amendments are to clarify the applicability, submission requirements, and approval criteria for 3 related but separate review processes: the preliminary design review, the site plan review, and the building plan review. The purpose, again, being to make development regulations consistent with our comprehensive plan goals and policies, but also with standard practice. improve the clarity of expectation regarding the review process, and to overall just provide better transparency. Our procedural timeline, we've had a number of workshops with the Planning Commission. We have met our SEPA requirements. Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 10th, and we had a workshop last week, and you have seen the Planning Commission's recommendations. Purpose of tonight is to take public testimony on this ordinance, and unless you have any questions for me, I'd like to stand down and let the public have their say.
Okay, without our attorney here, our public hearing is open at 8:06. And we invite your comments on the Liberty Lake site design review proposals. Is there any comment you might have? Otherwise, we'll have to close the hearing. We're going to close at 8:07. And now we have the City of Liberty Lake 6-year transportation improvement plans. Public hearing.
So, last meeting, I was not here, but Scott Bernard workshopped this with you. We've noticed this. This is an opportunity for the public to speak unless you have any questions on anything in the transportation improvement plan. Again, I would like to yield the floor to the public.
Okay, can you go to the second slide too, just so they can see that?
Can you put it on slideshow?
Those are all the projects out there, the cost.
Yeah, I There we go. And this is also in the council packets for the projects, but if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So, are there any comments from the public in regards to our public hearing will be open at 8:09? On the next 6-year transportation improvement plan. James, there we go, all right. Sorry.
James Alexander, Legacy Ridge. Just a question. I was looking at the plan for the Henry overpass, and it looks like it would go right across the existing exit from 90. So I'm wondering if we looked at that. We would have to tear down the existing one or go over it. So I know that's not specific to, we're going to spend money at this time, but I think it would impact that project if we haven't really thought that out. So if you know what I mean, there's an exit from I-90 onto Country Vista, I believe, Appleway, Country Vista. Yeah, and Harvard, the new Henry Road looks like it's going to cross right over that. So they would interfere with each other.
Well, I think what you'll see, it joins at the east, right? This is what you're saying, it comes out of Country Vista and goes east, right? There's going to be allocation for driveway or passage underneath the bridge on the south side of to a certain extent, in the final design.
Okay, as long as somebody's thought about how that works. To me, I looked at it and
And it's substantially east of the,
Yeah, I'm looking at it right here, and it's probably a good quarter of a mile.
it's further east than you think it is.
But again, when we look at the design of Henry Road, where there's making allocation
So,
for passage underneath the overpass to the south of I-90 and somewhat to the north of I-90.
that's the alignment right there.
yeah,
That
that
final
crosses.
design will
Okay,
alleviate any worries you might have.
okay, thank you, sir.
Further comments? Any other comments? Not hearing it, I'll say that the public hearing is closed at 8:11. The resolution before you
Resolution number 19-256, City of Liberty Lake, Spokane County, Washington. A resolution of the City of Liberty Lake updating the 6-year transportation improvement program for 2020 through 2025.
Mayor, I move resolution number 19-256.
And is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second. Discussion. Hugh, did you have anything that?
Why are you pointing at me? So I can discuss something.
Yeah.
One of the projects that Mayor brought us up to me about a week ago, we discussed it, probably, it's probably been a year since last time we talked about it. Great idea to bring back and put on transportation improvement plan is a trail between the middle school and the hub. And it actually, there'd be a corridor that would continue through into Spokane Valley. There's support from it from Central Valley School District, from Spokane Valley Fire Department as emergency access into the middle school from, I guess what would that be, kind of from the west. And I think that's a program, or I'm sorry, a project we should add on to the transportation improvement plan. So I think it's been worded in the past as trail with amenities. There was some other discussion, I don't know exactly what the project would look like, but trail connecting to figure out details later.
But it has to be on the plan.
Yeah.
It's currently an unimproved right-of-way that's managed by Spokane County, and there's been some preliminary conversation with the county, and they're willing to provide approval for us to use it for a trail connection.
Very nice.
So-
As the new middle school coming in and the programs that the hub does, especially with their connection with the middle school, I think it'd be a really great amenity, also just for the board residences of the river district and the north side.
I agree in identifying it as an objective is appropriate in the transportation improvement plan. I don't think it's definitely not accounted for right now.
Lisa, where would you add it on the list of this?
So we do have a cost estimate for the trail, and the cost estimate is $150,000 to develop the trail. That does include contingency. We would put it as a pedestrian and trail project within this. It is creating connectivity. The question becomes one, and it is one that is on your capital facility plan that was unfunded. So it would be it would go on there as a project to be completed by the city. Again, if you identify the year that you want to see it funded, we can reflect it appropriately in the amendment to this.
Well, we already, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm good with identifying 2025, for example, just to identify that it is an objective of the city and it lies within the plan.
In what year again?
2025. Just that it's present in our objective set.
I agree with that, Ann.
Okay. And that the amendment to the.
Shall we, yeah, I guess as stated, should we amend, Mr. Mayor, I move to amend Resolution 19-56 to include a reference to the, give this a name, the trail improvements.
Trail improvements between the Selkirk Middle School and the Hub Sports Facility.
Look, didn't we already had that in there? We just didn't approve it, correct?
It's not identified in our transportation improvement plan. That's the objective, just to identify. It was in the capital facilities, but it's not identified in the transportation. So, and I assert that at the value stated by Lisa, I think 175,
150,000.
150,000, and for the year 2025. That's
For the year 2025?
correct. As stated, that's the extent of our plan, 2020 to 2025.
You know, let's move that forward.
Of course. We start with that position.
Okay? So we're voting on that amendment then?
resolution.
On the
Motion
motion
stands
on the
seconded.
amendment, right? To add it.
Correct.
So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, adopted. And then motion on the
resolution.
resolution. Any further discussion? We don't take public comment on ordinances, but we don't take it on resolutions. Without further ado, then we'll take the vote on resolution 19256. All in favor, say aye. I count one, aye, four. It's adopted. And then first read ordinances, and we'll start with ordinance number 259, right?
City of Liberty Lake, Spokane County, Washington, ordinance number 259. An ordinance of the City of Liberty Lake, Washington, amending the City of Liberty Lake Development Code and the River District Development Regulations regarding site design review.
Okay. Introduction, upcoming agenda items, Kate?
Okay, so we have a presentation of asset management program by Jennifer and our consultant. We also are bringing forward to council the symphony agreement with the Friends of Pavilion Park. The amount budgeted and the amount of the request is for your approval of $13,750. I think that's the right amount of money. We also will have a first read on the donation policy. We will have a public hearing, a first read on the small cell, and a second read on the city's development code and river district development regulations.
Okay. For citizen comments?
I have a question for Katie. Katie, on the to be determined, that last one, it's been so long since this has been on it. Could you refresh us on the very last one? Consultant agreement for community outreach and improved communications. What was that again?
So that is something that we put into the budget, and we were going to use those funds for basically helping us with the trailhead project, etc. I haven't done anything with this, I'll be honest with you.
That's what I thought.
So,
Was it like 50,000 or so?
something like
Budget for
that, yeah. And you know, Mayor, there's one other thing that I am going to mention. I hope we're going to make it on the second, but it would be a right-of-way land transaction with Centennial Properties. So last I heard from Sean was this morning, I think we talked, and he thinks that we should be ready for July 2nd. So I'll give you more details in the executive session.
Okay. None? Citizen comments? That's bite at the apple. Come on, guys.
Rush that podium.
With that said, we're going to go into executive. We do?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, ma'am. All right.
Please.
You're encouraging it.
Yes, I am. We're glad you're here.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Kate Lavin. I am in the River District. I wanted to, say thank you again for the Orchard Park. It's been phenomenal. We had a blast this weekend with it. Wanted to share a couple points of feedback that I got from people because there were tons and tons of people there, and there were tons of people when we were driving here for the meeting tonight too. One of the things that I was going to point out was the sprinklers go on pretty late in the morning, and anybody who has young children, like I have 2 under 4, we had to navigate around to not get sprayed. And then several other parents were expressing concern that the shaded spot was completely drenched, and there was spots for one person to sit at those long benches because the overspray from the sprinklers made it uncomfortable for little children and whiny parents to sit on wet spots. So that was one thing. One other note that somebody else mentioned was there was a lot of confusion about are there park hours and what are the splash pad hours. And so people were kind of walking around looking for signage for that. The only other note I had about that was something that was discussed earlier with the parking. There are people parking right near that intersection at Indiana and Harvest and making it kind of concerning and confusing for people. They have made it to where there's only really room for one car to go. And so people were getting a little bit nervous, especially with people who have their dogs and cats and strollers and, everybody going to try to be as close to the park as they could, but avoid having to actually go in the parking lot. So
We'll note all your comments.
Yeah.
and we'll make sure that Jen is aware of them, right? So,
We're aware.
and we'll follow up.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, have a good evening.
And we'll go into executive session for how long?
10 minutes.
So we'll go into executive session now, we're done at 8:30, not make a decision when we come out.